Heston Kjerstad did all he possibly could in his return to the big leagues, but it wasn't enough, and the Orioles dropped a fourth game in a row, falling to the Guardians on Monday night. And I'll have the recap coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Orioles fans, today is Tuesday, June 25th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap another Orioles loss as they have dropped their fourth straight game, falling 3-2 to the Guardians on Monday night. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including a fantastic return to the bigs for Heston Kjerstad, a really good start from Cade Povich, but another quiet night for the Orioles bats. Then we'll talk a little bit more about Kjerstad. Why did he come up at this point? And what can his role be moving forward? Does he have a chance now to fit into a regular spot in the Orioles lineup? And finally, just a general look at the end of the pod at the Orioles outfield as a whole. There's been a lot of moving parts out there this season. There's a lot of questions about who fills what role. We'll try to parse it out at the end of the show. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use code all lowercase lockedonmlb for a first deposit match up to $100. So we start today with an Orioles loss. Final score from Oriole Park at Camden Yards on Monday night in Game 1 of a 7-game homestand this week is the Cleveland Guardians 3 and the Orioles 2. It's Game 1 of a 3-game set between two of the best teams in the American League, and the Guardians come out on top. The Orioles dropping their 4th consecutive game, which is now a season high. 4-game losing streak is their longest of the year, but there's still 20 games over 500, still 49-29. And with the Yankees off on Monday, the Orioles fall to 2 games back of New York in the AL East. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' loss to the Guardians on Monday. And the first thing you need to know is Heston Kjerstad was really good in his return to the big leagues. We'll get to it more in the second segment of this show, but Kjerstad was recalled before Monday's game to rejoin the roster and was immediately in the starting lineup, batting 5th and playing left field. And despite an Orioles loss, he had an impact on this game. Kjerstad going 2 for 4 in this one. He didn't wait around at all. Now, it wasn't his first at-bats of the year. Remember, he had that shorter stint up in the bigs earlier in the season. But the first pitch he sees in the second inning, 100 off the bat, lines a double. Second pitch he sees in the 4th inning, bloops a single. Then there was a pop-up later, and then there was one of the greatest at-bats I've ever seen from a hitter for an at-bat that ended in an out. Bottom of the 8th inning, Orioles trailing 3-2. Anthony Santander had just walked to go to first base with 2 down, and Heston Kjerstad comes up to the plate against Hunter Gaddis, who has like a 1.2 ERA on the season for the Guardians. He has been tremendous. And Kjerstad just fights and fights and fights. A 13-pitch at-bat in the bottom of the 8th, 7 2-strike foul balls. Anthony Santander was gassed because there were so many 3-2 foul balls. And of course, with 3-2, 2 outs and Santander at first, he was running on the pitch each time. And then Kjerstad would foul it off again. Santander would have to round second, walk his way back to first base. Unfortunately, it did end with a fly out to center field to end the threat and end the inning. From my couch, and for a lot of people in the ballpark, I thought he got it. Kjerstad was all over a 96-mile-per-hour fastball in the middle of the plate. I mean, he just missed it. Hit it out to dead center field, which obviously deepest part of the ballpark. That hurt his chances to hit it out in that moment, but hit it 98 off the bat. It traveled 331 feet, was just a little bit under it to fly out to center instead of what I thought initially was going to be a go-ahead 2-run homer in the 8th. He just looked locked in. Like, Gaddis throwing fastballs, sliders, changeups. It didn't matter. Kjerstad was spitting on all of them. He hit the ball hard. He attacked early like the Orioles are known to do. And hey, he almost made a really nice play in left field, almost threw out David Fry, trying to stretch a single into a double late in the game as well. Held his own in the vast left field, just his second start out there, out by Baltimore at Camden Yards in his career. So I figured It's a pretty good, not debut, but start of his second stint in the bigs for Kjerstad this year. Second thing you need to know from the O's loss Monday is that was kind of it for the Orioles offense. Not a lot else going on. As I said, they scored the 2 runs. It was a Gunnar leadoff double and a Ryan O'Hearn RBI single in the first to get them on the board. Then with an Adley double and the help of a Guardians error, a Santander sac fly in the third tied the game at 2. And that was it for the Orioles. They did not record a hit after the third inning. They only had 2 base runners after the third inning. It was a couple of walks, including that Santander walk that I mentioned. And they really didn't square the ball up in this game. Just 4 hard hit balls in this game for the Orioles. That is not good at all. They struck out 13 times against Guardians pitching. In this one, Tanner Bybee was incredible. 6 innings, 1 earned run. And the Guardians bullpen, which to be fair, has been the best in baseball this year. Tim Herrin, Hunter Gaddis, and Scott Barlow, even with the Guardians' 2 top high leverage guys, Emmanuel Clase and Cade Smith, unavailable because they pitched so much lately. That's how good the Guardians bullpen is. Tim Herrin, a 1.13 ERA in the 7th. Hunter Gaddis, a 1.47 ERA in the 8th. And Scott Barlow, who has the worst ERA in the Cleveland bullpen at 3.66, strikes out the side of the bottom of the 9th to end the game. Orioles just, for the 3rd straight game, I mean, they've scored 4 runs total in the last 3 games. The offense just hasn't had it. They're in a little bit of a slump. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but what it also snapped is the streak by the Orioles offense. They had gone 22 consecutive games with a home run. That streak ends on Monday night. It is an Orioles franchise record. The all-time MLB record is 31 consecutive games with a homer. So hopefully tonight they will start another streak. Third thing you need to know for the O's from Monday night's game is that Cade Povich was really solid in another big league start. Ended up going 5 2/3 innings in this game, allowing 3 runs on 7 hits, 5 Ks, a walk, and a home run on 95 pitches. And he allowed 7 hard hit balls by Guardians hitters in this one. You really like what you see because, listen, he only walked 1 batter after walking 5 batters in his last start in Yankee Stadium. Somehow he got out of that start with only 1 run allowed. But I thought he was good in this one. Like the fastball continues to kind of defy logic at times, but the fastball continue to do what it's done. It's not high velocity. He touched 93, 94 a couple of times, but he's, 91 to 92 with that 4-seamer, yet he threw it 40 out of his 95 pitches, and he gets pop-ups. He allowed 1 hard hit ball on the fastball all night. He gets him to foul it off. He gets him to have weak contact. He had a bunch of called strikes on that fastball. I don't know if it's the ride. I don't know if it's good extension from Povich. I'm still kind of looking into it, but there's something about that 4-seamer, despite the velo being down, and the stuff plus numbers are not great on that pitch either. They're like 80 or something, like with the average being close to 100. That's not great, but it plays. And as long as it keeps playing, keep throwing it in the zone. And that's what Povich did. I've talked about it after every Cade Povich start. When he attacks in the zone, his stuff plays up in the zone. And when he doesn't, he gets in trouble. He attacked the zone. Did he, give up a hit to the first 3 batters and the Guardians scored a run? Yeah. Did he give up a monster solo homer in the 6th to Jose Ramirez that ended up being the difference-making run? Yes, he did. But I thought he attacked well. His sweeper looked really good. He was getting whiffs on that. He mixed all 5 of his pitches. I got to tell you, I said it on Monday's episode after Albert Suarez struggled again in Houston this weekend. Dean Kramer is coming back soon to the Orioles rotation, we think. And the O's could go to a 6-man rotation and just add Kramer. But if they want to keep the 5-man rotation, I think after seeing Suarez lately and seeing Povich lately, I think I would move Albert Suarez back to the bullpen and keep Cade Povich in this rotation when Kramer comes back. I think certainly at this point, he has earned that spot. Fourth thing you need to know from Monday's game is that the bullpen behind Povich was outstanding. They did a fantastic job of keeping it a 1-run game. Cionel Perez gave them 4 outs. Jacob Webb gave him a nice 8th inning. And Keegan Aiken, how about Keegan Aiken? Strikes out the side 1, 2, 3 in the 9th. Webb struck out the side in the 8th as well. And the Oriole bullpen combined 3 1/3 scoreless innings, 1 hit, 7 Ks, and 1 walk for that group. And you still didn't have to use Cano or Kimbrel. They, despite another loss, do get another day of rest for the Orioles, but this bullpen has been kind of over its skis at times. I liked how they looked on Monday night. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles 3-2 loss to the Guardians on Monday to open up this 3-game series is that, just in general, this is really the first rut that the Orioles have really been in, at least a somewhat extended rut of the year. And it's interesting timing because it's coming off that fantastic series win in New York, They take 2 out of 3 from the Yankees. They score 17 runs in the series finale to win it. And then, they have the game in Houston Friday night where they're down 14-3, and you're like, this is terrible. And they score 7 in the 8th and make it a close game. You're like, all right, even though you lose, that should be continued momentum. And it just hasn't, right? 4 runs in the last 3 games for the Orioles. But the thing for me is, it's unfortunate. They have lost 4 games in a row. That is their longest losing streak of the season. But you put it in perspective of that series against the Yankees was probably pretty tiring. I mean, the Yankees came out and lost 2 of 3 at home to the Braves after that series because they put a lot into that one against the Orioles. The O's have lost 4 in a row since that series ended. And this is not only just the Orioles' toughest stretch of the year, this is one of the toughest stretches any team in Major League Baseball will play this season, because not only are the Orioles in the midst of the month of June where they only have 1 off day, and they've already had it. They're continuing on to play every single day. You've got this stretch of 5 series, Braves, Phillies, at Yankees, at Astros, and Guardians. Right there, I would be willing to bet that is 5 postseason teams right there. And then your next team up after that is the Rangers, who haven't been great this year, but you may remember they are the defending World Series champions. This stretch continues. There was a big stretch of AL East games before that. I would argue this is the toughest month any team will go through in baseball this year. And the O's have been great. They won the series against the Braves, won it against the Phillies, won it against the Yankees. That was spectacular. They dominated those series against the AL East before that. But you had to know a little bit of a rut was coming here, just where the schedule is. And it's nice to have it come in June, come where the Orioles have some leeway. They're still 20 games over 500. They're still only 2 back of the Yankees. And you expected something like this right around this time last year, June 27th through July 4th of last season. The Orioles did the exact same thing. They had a stretch without some off days. They played some tough opponents, and they just got into a rut offensively, and they lost 6 of 7 games. It was their worst stretch of 2023, and it also included a 4-game losing streak, which was their longest streak of last year. And at the end of losing 6 out of 7, the Orioles were 6 games out of first place behind the Rays. They're in a similar rut right now, and they are only 2 games back of first place from the Yankees. You could argue they're in a better spot this year in a very similar rut. Now, you want to get a win back and kind of roll things in the other direction, and they might just need a dominant start maybe from Cole Irvin tonight. He wasn't great in his last start, but there's a lot of lefties in that Guardians order, so hopefully it plays well for Irvin and he can pitch deep into the game. And just, sometimes when you're in a rut, your offense isn't playing well. You just need a starting pitcher to go shove 7 innings of 1-run baseball and just scratch across a 2-1 win, and that changes everything in your clubhouse. That's what the O's need right now. But I'm not super worried, and I'm not panicked, because again, the same thing happened at the exact time last year, and they still won the AL East. And this is a tougher stretch here than they were in last year. And listen, they're still a great baseball team with a lot of things going for them. If it's the offense that's struggling, I'm not worried about that. Yeah, the starting pitching was worrying me a little bit, but it was nice to see Povich get that good start on Monday night. This team will be fine. You knew a rut. You had to know, looking at the schedule, a rut was going to come right around now. And here it is. And here's to hoping they can just get a win on the board and kind of flip the script a little bit. But after seeing less than a week ago how they played against the Yankees, I'm not going to be super worried after 4 games here, considering those 3 series against the Braves, Phillies, and Yankees. The O's were just outstanding. But they did call up some reinforcements on Monday to maybe help them get out of this little slump that they are in. And the reinforcements were Heston Kjerstad, who was fantastic in his first game back on Monday night. But coming up next, I'll tell you why they recalled Kjerstad, why they made the move, and how he may fit in to this roster as long as he stays up here in the bigs. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Now, it may be June, but here at Locked On Orioles, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It is year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garner your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. So don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A-plus rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or you finally hit that parlay this season and just need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon and see the link in the episode description below. And this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by supplyhouse.com. Order supplies from the website that's made for the skilled trades. Find thousands of parts from hundreds of brands in just a couple clicks at supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com gives you 24/7 access to a huge selection of plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with fast delivery anywhere in the U.S. Need help with an order? Get industry-leading after-sales service from their friendly and knowledgeable customer support team and talk to a real person every time. And there's great news for plumbers, technicians, and contractors. Being a pro has its perks. Trade industry professionals can join their free Trade Master program for free shipping and serious discounts on every order. Over 100,000 pros already trust the Trade Master program to deliver results. So apply for your membership today and get a competitive edge on every order at supplyhouse.com/TM. Save money and time when you order online. Order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. So the Orioles fell to the Guardians 3-2 on Monday night, but it certainly was not the fault of Heston Kjerstad, who returned to the roster on Monday and had a really, really good-looking debut, at least re-debut back into the Orioles order. And that's what I want to talk about now, the roster move the Orioles made on Monday, as they recalled Heston Kjerstad from AAA Norfolk and put him right in the roster on Monday night. Now, Kjerstad had one other stint in the big leagues earlier this year, did not make the opening day roster out of spring training. We thought after Kjerstad got that run at the end of 2023, was on the playoff roster, we figured he's got an inside edge to make the team this year out of camp. But Colton Cowser was so amazing in spring training that he just earned that spot on the team, and Kjerstad went to AAA. Well, Kjerstad demolished AAA, and on April 23rd, the Orioles called up Kjerstad for the first time this season. Now, he only played in 7 games, and in 17 plate appearances, went 2 for 14, couple of singles, 6 strikeouts, 2 walks, just 2 hard hit balls. Wasn't great. He started only 4 of the 17 games he was here for, 2 in left field, one at Oriole Park, and 2 in right field defensively. For those 4 starts, he was basically mostly used as a pinch hitter off the bench when the O's needed to get a big power lefty up there. But in the 2 stints in AAA, he was then sent back down to AAA on May 13th when they swapped him for Kyle Stowers, and Stowers actually ended up producing a little more at the big league level. But in AAA, just been phenomenal. About 250 plate appearances, hitting .301 with a .397 on base and a .601 slugging. That is a .998 AAA OPS with 16 long balls for the Norfolk Tides this year, 48% hard hit rate, 7% barrel rate, just destroying fastballs. He hasn't been as good in June, but that's still been an .811 OPS down in Norfolk this June. So at least in terms of the stats he is putting up, certainly he deserved a call up to the big leagues. But the question now is, okay, what is his role? Because he was called up to just fill a better spot on the roster. Nick Maton was DFA'd to make room for Kjerstad on the roster. Maton, who was called up last week because the Orioles quite simply needed another infielder, with Jordan Westberg having a little bit of hip trouble, and they couldn't go with no infielders on the bench, so they had to call up Maton, which meant there was really no other option, as I talked about, besides sending Stowers down to make room. So with Westberg fine and back and ready to go, Maton wasn't starting. Maton wasn't coming off the bench. There was really no need for Nick Maton. So the Orioles DFA'd him, put him on waivers, and figured, hey, if we're going to have a bench bat, let's at least have someone who we could use from time to time. And Heston Kjerstad certainly makes the Orioles better on this roster than Nick Maton does. Now, you could argue, well, if he's just going to be basically a pinch hitter like he was in his first stint, is it really worth it for him to be up here? When you're trying to win a World Series, you could argue yes, because at the end of the day, Kjerstad over Maton, no matter what the role is, makes the Orioles a better baseball team. But when you're asking what his role is, it's likely, even though he started in left field and hit 5th on Monday night, it's likely it's going to be similar to what it was that first stint. In the outfield now, you have 5 of them again on the roster: Mullins, Cowser, Santander, Hayes, and Kjerstad. And of course, you also have Ryan O'Hearn, who can play the outfield and will start out there a little bit. Now, Anthony Santander has been swinging it great. He's going to be in there every day. Might DH a little bit, mostly is going to be your right fielder. And Cedric Mullins is swinging it much, much better lately. He actually snapped a 10-game hitting streak in starts with the offer he had on Monday night. But if it's a right-handed pitcher, Mullins is going to be out there in center field. Now, he may still sit against lefties. It's been a struggle for him, but he's going to be out there against righties. And Colton Cowser has struggled recently, but you still want him in there versus a righty. And Austin Hayes has been better since coming back, and he's certainly going to start in left field against every lefty that the Orioles have seen. So these guys kind of all have roles. And the question is, what do you do with Kjerstad? Well, there was a righty on the mound in Tanner Bybee on Monday night. And how do the Orioles get Kjerstad in? Well, they simply sat Colton Cowser in this game. He's been struggling over the last month and a half or so, and we'll get to that in the third segment of the episode, but they can do it just like this, have the regular lineup, right, with O'Hearn in there. And they did a little bit of weird stuff because Mountcastle got the day off, McCann catching, Adley DHing, but you have Santander in right, Mullins in center, O'Hearn the DH, and then essentially it's just either Cowser or Kjerstad in left field against a right-handed pitcher. Now, against a lefty, you're going to have Hayes in left. You're probably going to have Cowser in center, Santander in right, and that's when McCann usually catches. But maybe if Adley catches against a lefty, maybe you can DH Kjerstad, even though you don't want to go a lot of lefty-lefty with the young guy. Maybe you can give him those chances. But what it tells me that Kjerstad came immediately up and started and hit fifth is that the O's are going to be willing to maybe mix and match Kjerstad and Cowser in the outfield a little bit. And I think Kjerstad is going to get more chances than he did the first time. Now, at worst, his role will be pinch hitter off the bench, starts once a week, and then pinch hits for Mateo or Arias late in a big situation. But if the O's even trust Kjerstad a little bit in left field, he could play. And that's the other issue. Left field on the road, usually no problem. It's an easier outfield position. But the O's have 7 games in a row at home, and it told me a lot that they started him in the vast left field at Camden Yards, which he'd only done once before on Monday night. It kind of tells me that, hey, the O's trust him enough to send him out there. He played the whole game out in left field, and it didn't go poorly. So if he can show that he can at least be like an average defender, if he can get to like maybe close to Anthony Santander levels of defense, shout out to Santander for throwing out a run at the plate on Monday night, he can at least kind of swap himself out with Colton Cowser until Cowser gets the bat going. And that is where I want to get to with this final segment podcast, because we talk all about, okay, what does Kjerstad do here, in the short term, but also what do they do in the outfield in the long term? Because they're going to want to figure this out before they get to playoff time and know what their lineup's going to look like. I'll try another crack at that to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks. And Prize Picks for me is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. You just go on the app and you pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. And now you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into thousands. And listen, the hoops action is over on the men's side, but it doesn't stop on Prize Picks. Women's basketball in the WNBA still heating up. You got Caitlin Clark, you got Angel Reese trying to make names for themselves. Put your lineups in and you could win 100 times your cash. They also have Major League Baseball entries that you can use every single day. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That is code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. It's at Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So to finish off today's show, I wanted to kind of continue the conversation about the Orioles outfield because Heston Kjerstad is here and he got the start in left field. And as I mentioned, Anthony Santander, he is your everyday right fielder. Cedric Mullins has been better. He's going to be in center most days. We'll sit versus some lefties, but Colton Cowser can play center as well and is going to be out there. Austin Hayes been a pretty nice platoon bat. He's going to play against some lefties. You might get him out there against a few right-handers and can play 3 outfield spots. And the thing about Hayes and Mullins is even if both are struggling, they both pretty much have roster spots locked down because the defense, the veteran leadership, and the ability to play all 3 outfield positions if they need to. Now, the big wild card here when it pertains to Heston Kjerstad is Colton Cowser, because Cowser has not been great since an amazing April. He had just a 580 OPS in May. He had just a 587 OPS in June. The weird part about Kjerstad is everything under the hood really looks great. 50.4% hard hit rate is second on the Orioles, 23rd in Major League Baseball. 15.6% barrels per batted ball event is 18th in Major League Baseball. Basically, when Kjerstad makes contact, he is absolutely mashing the baseball. And we saw that a lot in the month of April. Haven't seen as much contact over the last few months. And that is the one issue, despite the fact that, hey, when he hits the ball, watch out. But he's not hitting the ball nearly enough. His 30% strikeout rate and 33% swing and miss rate, both near the bottom of the league in the majors. And when you take fastballs out of the equation, it gets really bad. He is whiffing at over a 40% clip at breaking balls and off-speed pitches, basically changeups and split fingers this year. All you got to do at this point, if you are a major league pitcher, is throw Colton Kjerstad a non-fastball. That is the goal. Throw him a non-fastball. And we are at the point in Kjerstad's career where he struggled when he first came up last year. He returned this year. He adjusted. Then major league pitchers adjusted to say, okay, he's struggling with soft stuff. Now he has to adjust back. It is the chess game that every major league hitter plays, especially early in their career. And most of these guys go through these peaks and valleys in their first couple years in the big leagues before they figure it out. Now, if anybody's throwing Colton Kjerstad a fastball right now, I'm not sure they should be a major league pitcher because he has a 95.1 mile per hour average exit velocity against fastballs. Remember, 95 is considered hard hit. That's his average against a fastball with a 563 slugging percentage against fastballs this year, but he's hitting under 200 and whiffing a lot against changeups and breaking balls. Now, he also has been playing outstanding defense. He's the Orioles leader in outs above average, and a stat called StatCast fielding runs value, which tries to encompass everything a fielder does via StatCast. He is the fourth best in baseball among all positions in Major League Baseball in fielding runs value. He has, without a doubt, been one of the best defensive left fielders in the major leagues and one of the best defenders in the major leagues. Now, he hasn't been as good when he's been in center, but in left, he's been tremendous for the Orioles this year. So that adds up to they're going to keep him on the roster. They're going to continue to give him playing time, and he is going to figure it out at the plate again while he continues to still provide value for the Orioles. It's very similar to Cedric Mullins. He's still playing great defense and is still providing a lot of value when he's out there, even if he isn't hitting to the level that he was in April. So it kind of leaves you to the fact that Santander, Mullins, Hayes, and Kjerstad, they're going to have roster spots on this team really all year. Now, you do have a fifth outfield spot in theory. So the question is just who gets it? Is it Heston Kjerstad or is it Kyle Stowers? That is basically the question. Kyle Stowers had to go back down to AAA on June 19th. I mentioned it was just a roster issue. The Orioles needed an infielder. He was the only guy who could realistically go down. He will be eligible to come back to the big leagues on Saturday, June 29th. His 10 days in AAA will be up and he can come back to the Orioles. This weekend is going to be an interesting case because Stowers had been hitting the ball hard. He had been playing a lot, but he had been producing when he'd been in the Oriole lineup. And he is without a doubt a better outfield defender than Heston Kjerstad is. But maybe Kjerstad can use this week to get hot. And if the Orioles want to give Kjerstad a little break and they want to play Kjerstad a lot this week and give him a chance to really get regular at-bats and get hot, I could certainly see it happening. Either way, the guy who doesn't end up with the spot is going to be great depth to have. And, this becomes another conversation when Jackson Holliday ever comes back to the big leagues this year. Do you drop an infielder like Ramon Arias, or does he take the fifth quote-unquote outfielder spot and both Kjerstad and Stowers maybe end up in AAA? That's a possibility as well. But what I do think is the Orioles are just going to play the hot hand. Between Kjerstad, Kjerstad, and Stowers, they're going to have the two best guys up here, and it's usually going to be Kjerstad because of his defense. But between Kjerstad and Stowers, I think they're going to continue to cycle through them. With those other four, you just can't roster the two of them. You can't roster six outfielders. It can't happen. So you're just going to play the hot hand, and this is Kjerstad's chance. It's unfortunate. It's kind of unfair that he has like 1 week right now of maybe regular at-bats, probably not even regular, somewhat regular at-bats to prove himself. But that's where we're at in this Orioles system. There is so much hitting talent that if you don't produce, there's another guy knocking on the door immediately to come up. It's what happened to Kjerstad last time. They flipped him for Stowers. Stowers produced and held the spot for a while. You have even guys like Holliday coming back soon, Connor Norby, Kobe Mayo, guys knocking on the door for this playing time. And again, it's unfair to ask a rookie in 1 week to prove himself, but that's what you have to do at this point. Now, there will be a bigger opening next year, Anthony Santander is a free agent after this season. I would love for the O's to bring him back, but we will see. There could be a wide gaping hole in right field that Kjerstad or Stowers could take over in 2025. But for this year, it's all about playing the hot hand and who is going to produce for you. And maybe after the 2 hits on Monday, Kjerstad can be that hot hand for a while, and maybe he stays here and Stowers does stay in AAA. But either way, whoever is down in Norfolk is going to be fantastic depth for the Orioles, as we saw earlier this year. Connor Norby, fantastic depth to have. Kyle Stowers, Heston Kjerstad, fantastic depth to have. And the other thing is, you got to be patient with these guys. The Orioles are showing you even need to be patient with the veterans. People were ready to give up on Austin Hayes and Cedric Mullins and Ramon Arias and Anthony Santander. And look at it now. They are all producing once again. You just got to be a little bit patient. Even guys like Kyle Stowers. I mean, I'll tap my chest. I pronounced Stowers close to done after his 2023 season. Now he's truly back in the fold. Now people are saying Colton Cowser is done. That's not the case. These guys are rookies. You got to give them time. I mean, we're giving the veterans time and they are figuring it out. That means especially you got to give the rookies time. And here's the thing. The O's have so many options that it's okay if Stowers now spends a month in AAA. It's okay if later in the year Kjerstad goes back to AAA and spends a month there. They're not going to be fully everyday players just because the talent on this roster. And so it's okay to give them time because eventually all these guys are either going to be traded for pitching or become everyday players for the Orioles. They've got time to do that. But right now, having them even just as depth on the bench or as depth in AAA still makes the Orioles a better and deeper team. And it is going to help them because the other thing is we've seen it mostly with pitching this year, but with some hitters, health is not guaranteed. Guys get injured. And when you have that kind of depth ready to step up, it can really, really help your ball club try and win a World Series here in 2024. So we'll see how this outfield continues to play out. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. I will be back tomorrow. We will recap Game 2 between the Orioles and the Guardians. Hopefully, it is the O's snapping what has become a 4-game losing streak. As I mentioned, Cole Irvin will take the hill for the Orioles. A lot of lefties at Guardians lineup. So for the lefty Irvin, hopefully he can feast a bit and get the Orioles back to their winning ways. And speaking of lefties, it will be a young lefty in Logan Allen there for the Guardians. He has been struggling a bit this year. A 5.23 ERA for the left-hander in 15 starts this season. Been a little better as of late, but not amazing. We'll see if the O's who have hit lefties well this year can turn it around offensively as well in tonight's game. And then I'm back, of course, tomorrow to recap it all. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.